This plant, which I got at the same time, was fertilized. I mean, come on. Did you know that most orchid growers make the same mistakes when they start growing orchids? Now, if you watch this video, you're not going to be one of those people. You are going to grow your orchids. They're going to be healthy and happy, and you're going to be so fulfilled with these big, huge blooms that you're able to produce. I've written down 13 different mistakes that I see people make all the time. So today, we're going to make sure that you don't make those mistakes. Let's jump in. Just so you know I'm the real deal, I want you to take a look at what we got going on here. It's dendrobium season, hard cane dendrobium, so we have a million of those going on. We have a bunch of vanda in the background here. These might be some of my favorite flowers, very healthy and happy. As you can see, wow, look at this one. How pretty is that? As you can see, whoa, look at the size of this. That is awesome. As you can see, there's a lot of happy, healthy, green, thriving, growing orchids here. So listen to me. Listen to me. I'm very smart. I'm not that smart, but I spend a lot of time out here, kind of addicted. My wife thinks I'm crazy. My kids wonder why I'm always out here. But luckily, I'm right off the back porch, so they can see me and I can talk to them, and my dogs can come out here and play with me. So let's talk. Let's talk about mistakes. Number one, most people have a hard time with this whole concept of orchids not needing soil. When you think of a plant, you say, okay, well, a plant puts its roots down in the soil. The soil gives the plant nutrients, gives the roots nutrients. It goes into the plant and the plant grows and is happy. Orchids, that's not how this works. Orchids in nature grow on trees. They are epiphytic. They grow on trees, and they don't use soil at all. The roots do not absorb nutrients through their roots using soil. The way that orchids absorb nutrients is through their roots, but it's absorbed through water. Really, in nature, what's happening is tiny little bits of stuff falling off in the trees, landing on the orchids, landing on the roots, and they're kind of scavengers. They're fertilizer scavengers. So, I mean, if you look at these vandas here, you see these green, happy roots, no soil. So you're like, well, how in the heck do they live? Where do they get their nutrients from? Water lands on them, sunlight hits them, so the photosynthesis gives them energy and growth, and little bits of stuff falls on them. Now, I use fertilizer because we're not in nature. We're in a pool cage. So there's nothing falling on them. So if you plant an orchid in soil, it will die. The roots will suffocate. That's not what they want. Even if you look at one of my gorgeous dendrobium here, if you look at, it's not in soil. It's in like bark and these little, like, they look like Cocoa Puffs. They're little hard little balls. So really, if you look at a potted orchid, what it's potted in is just stuff that it can stick its roots to, and then the fertilizer rains down onto the roots. It gets nothing from the medium itself. This is like the number one thing people don't understand. They think they have to plant it in soil, and then the thing ends up dying on them, and they don't understand. If you look, we're going to get into this. Look at how many of mine are just hanging up on nothing. It's like a pieces of bark and on wood. They have nothing. So that is mistake number one. See, you're never going to make it again. Number two, orchids hate direct sunlight. It has to be filtered. So as you can see, I'm in a pool screen. I'm inside a pool. Whoop. Right, there's the pool. There's the screen. So it's filtered sun. So what happens if you put orchids, again, think about nature. They're in trees. They're epiphytic. I cannot pronounce that word today. They hang on trees. They stick to trees. So they're under the cover of the tree. So it's like dappled sunlight. They're never in direct sun. So what happens when an orchid gets direct sun? Well, it is a nightmarish scenario, and it happened to be. I, I'm so ashamed as an orchid grower that this happened, but it did. There was a hurricane. It blew out one of the ceiling screens, so there's no more filter, and the sunlight was able to come straight down. There's no filtering, and it hit one of my plants, and this. Don't tear leaves off like I am. What the heck? It ruined my day. It was a bad situation. It took me a while to recover from this. There's a bunch of leaves that ended up looking like that. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but this plant had a bunch of leaves burned. One of my favorite plants, too. It's very upsetting. I mean, that is, for that kind of, I mean, that's a big plant. I mean, these things are huge. I love these dendrobium. Oh my goodness. Ugh. I mean, that is a massive plant. They're not supposed to be that big. And look at all the flowers that are growing at the end. Look how green it is. See, us orchid people get just as excited about a big, green, lush plant as we do the flower itself. You get crazy. Oh, and the roots. Don't get me started with the roots. The roots are very exciting. Do you get excited about roots? I do. Okay, mistake number 2, do not put plants in sunlight. Okay, this is a short mistake, but it is a pet peeve of mine. I always have people say to me that I can't grow orchids, I kill them every time. Can't grow orchids, I kill orchids. And I'm always thinking to myself, I'm like, how is everybody killing orchids? They're not that hard. Like, they're really not, and we're going to talk about it. And then I realized what they meant. You know those orchids you get at like Home Depot? They're called Phalaenopsis, and they flower for a long time. Those flowers last forever. And then when the flowers fall off, people are like, oh my goodness, I killed my orchid. No, you didn't kill your orchid. Do you think it's going to flower forever? What plant does that? It's going to drop off. My mom has a couple of these. She just sticks them by a bright window, gives them a little water here and there. And what do you know? A year later, new flowers. She didn't kill the flower. She didn't kill that plant. The plant's happy. So, yes, I mean, look, this whole table, they're not blooming. I mean, that's fine. Sometimes they bloom, sometimes they don't. Some of these bloom for months, some of them bloom for a week. There's lots of different orchids. All right, next up, let's talk about how people do not sanitize their tools. What do I mean by that? Well, orchids have fungus and bacteria, and viruses are terrifying. Viruses are really, we'll talk about that in a different video. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about here, I talk about in other videos. I'm going to talk about in future videos. So keep an eye on the channel, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, so you can see what's going on. So whenever you cut into a plant, you can't just go to the next plant and cut again, because what if there's stuff on it from the other plant? Because then you start, like, if I start pruning all of my orchids, I could suddenly infect the entire collection without even knowing it. That's why you have to sterilize. You got to sterilize the tools. This is the hardcore way of doing it. If you want to really make sure that everything is dead, sterilized. If you want to be a little more simple about it, some people will sterilize it at the beginning of their clipping session. And then, so this is rubbing alcohol. And just, so in between every time you cut something, just stick this thing in the rubbing alcohol. And that'll get rid of most stuff. So very, very important. I learned this the hard way. I've heard really bad situations where people have spread things throughout a collection. So don't forget, you got to sanitize your tools. Another mistake people make is they overwater their orchids. Now you have to remember, orchids live on trees. They generally, and I'm going to show you in a second here how to water an orchid, but they like to get very, very wet and then dry until they're almost like a cactus. So people oftentimes will water them like they are a house plant, where you always want to keep it moist. No, they want to be very, very dry, like dry, and then get it very, very wet, and then with that cycle, because in nature they're in these like tropical monsoon locations, so it rains, they get soaking wet, then the sun comes out, and they get super dry, and then it rains again. So what happens if you do not listen to me? Well, this happens. I don't know if you can see here, but these roots right here that are all like black and I guess they're more like green and brown, and these roots are dead. So what happened was this got so much water, and so much water sat around the roots of this thing that the roots suffocated and the roots died. So roots are not supposed to look like that. If you water orchids too much and put them in something where they're like sitting in water or always wet, this is going to happen. We don't want to overwater. Roots are supposed to look like these happy green ones. These are ones that are getting the appropriate amount of water, and they're not all brown and mushy. Again, I'm crazy. I get excited. Look at these roots. They're so happy. I'm a happy plant. I'm going to grow. Even though I'm dead here, I'm coming back to life. This one is just a very common misunderstanding. Most people think orchids are very hard to grow. They are not. They're not. I'm not that good with plants. I'm telling you, these are some of the easiest plants I have ever grown. If I never watered them, never fertilized them, never did anything, they would live. Like ever. I mean, they wouldn't be happy and they'd look kind of straggly, and they'd still live though. I mean, these things are tough. This whole idea that they're hard to grow, the main reason, well, A, that stupid Home Depot orchid misconception that if the bloom falls off, the thing's dead. But also, people try to grow orchids in climates that are not conducive to orchids. Like, I am so lucky. I am in southern Florida here. It's hot. You know, it's in the 90s 6 months out of the year. It's super humid. And if you think about where orchids grow, orchids grow in Florida, in nature, naturally. In fact, I'm going to blow your mind here. I guess it's not, to me, it blows my mind. So this guy here, which I just got, not a very impressive flower, but this is native to Florida. If you walk around in Florida, you might see this just growing by the side of the road. How cool is that? So if you live in Pennsylvania and you're trying to grow orchids outside, they're going to die. It needs to be hot and humid, lots of sunlight, lots of light, not filtered light, not direct light. So, you know, you can have a greenhouse up north and really mess with the conditions so it's conducive to, I know guys in Canada that are growing orchids, but you need a greenhouse for it. If you live like in the deep south, you can have orchids outside during a lot of the year, and then in winter you have to bring them inside. Again, luckily I'm able to keep these out here all year because this is their natural climate. If an orchid goes down below like 50, then you have to start to worry a little bit. So like I said, these things are pretty cold sensitive. In fact, I think that's one of the other mistakes I have. So I think I just gave away another mistake. That's too bad. Okay, this goes back to the watering thing. Let's talk about pots. So if you have a Phalaenopsis and you're in Indiana and you have it inside and you put an ice cube on it every week, A, do not put an ice cube on it. They don't like that. Just put a few tablespoons of water, lukewarm water. Okay, well, that's one thing. But generally speaking, you have to have pots that have a lot of airflow in them because, again, they like the wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry. So pot with no hole, bad. An orchid will die in this. Guaranteed 100%. Pot with lots of holes in it, good. Terracotta, the water breathes, water comes in and out through the terracotta. There's holes, there's airflow, happy orchid, right? Whoa, what we have here? Mega happy orchid. Now we're getting a little advanced here because I'd put an orchid in here, we would hang it, but this is like, I mean, mega airflow, super happy. The roots have something to attach themselves to. This is like primo orchid container. But that's that. Again, it's so hard for me to go over everything. There's so much when it comes to orchids. So take a look at my other videos. I wish I could go over more. I have such limited time here. I don't want to make this video too long, but subscribe or just look at my channel if any of this stuff is interesting to you, because I have like whole videos on putting stuff in baskets like that, or I have whole videos on how to water or all that kind of stuff. So the next mistake sounds a little weird, but people don't water long enough. I'm going all over the place with this watering stuff. But water is like the besides light, the biggest piece to all of this. So whenever you do water orchids, you want to like, sometimes you see like online, or you like spritz it, like I'm gonna mist my orchid. It'll make my orchid happy. Psst, psst, psst. Every day I'm gonna mist it. Psst, psst. No, no, it's not how it works. Orchids do not want to be spritzed. They want to be soaked. They want to be soaked, and then they want to dry all the way. So what I'll do in the morning, like in, you know, in a hot morning when it has been raining all the time, is I will start to, right? I'll spray my orchids. But I spray it more than that. Is that enough? Nope. Okay. So now not only did I spray them for a while, I'm going to go spray everything else normally. And then I'm going to come back probably 5 minutes later. And guess what? I'm going to spray it again. Because what happens is the roots, they get, just like when you pour water on like really dry dirt and it kind of runs off, it's the same with orchid roots. So if the orchid root is bone dry and you water it, most of the water kind of drains off. So you want to water it when it's wet. So the first time you make it wet, and the second time when it's already wet, it can really absorb the water. So some orchid people are nuts, and they will orchid it. They'll water it like 2 or 3 or 4 times, just go round and around and around until they know they're super, super, super saturated. And you know they are wet and saturated when you see them. You know they're wet and saturated when you see these very, very wet green roots. You want green, dark green. And then they'll turn white when they're dry again, and you'll know you have to water them. Actually, let me show you one that's white so you know what a dry one looks like. This is my work area. Pretty messy, but okay. So here is, so do you see how these roots are white? Not green, they're white. So you want them, once they're white like this, then you water them until they're green. So that is how you water. Let me give you one more example. Hold on. Okay, let's water this gorgeous bifoliate cattleya. I'm gonna do whole videos and stuff like this, but okay, we're gonna water it. Okay, that's what you would do to a houseplant, right? It is, but that's not enough. Soak, 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 soak. Okay, now I'm gonna go drink some coffee. I'm gonna come back in 10 minutes, and I'm gonna water them again. Same concept. Same concept. Next mistake has to do with watering again. You do not want to water your orchids at night, okay? Because what happens is the orchids stay wet all night, and that's very conducive to fungus. And fungus is you're constantly battling fungus when you're dealing with orchids, because orchids grow in rainy, humid climates. So it's conducive to fungus. You should only water your orchids in the morning so you know they'll be bone dry by evening. And also, let's just go to the next mistake. Um, this is one of the biggest mistakes I see by new growers. You know when you're walking around your garden and you see something, you see a leaf, and the leaf doesn't look happy. Maybe it looks a little like dry and a little shriveled. It just, like, I found one here, a good example. I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see this, but it's a little yellow. You see how it's not real? You know, it's kind of soft. So you see it and you go, holy moly, that thing is like in desperate need of water, right? It's dry. So you water it. And then you come back a week later, it looks just as bad, maybe a little worse. And you're like, holy cow. So you water it some more. And then you water it some more. And then it dies completely. And you're like, what the heck happened? I watered it. Why is it? You were making a very common but big mistake. The leaves looked like that, not because they were dry, but because they were rotted, right? We just talked about this one. The reason why this one looks sad like that is because look at what it's connected to. Look at the roots it's connected to. it can't get any water or food because its roots are dead. So as you water, 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 it makes it much, much worse. It makes it rot more, 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 and then it dies. I see this a lot with Phalaenopsis, the Home Depot orchids. Just because the leaves look shrivelly, 90% of the time, that's because the roots are dead. It's not because it needs more water. Okay, the next mistake sounds a little weird, but people don't water long enough. I'm going all over the place with this watering stuff. But water is like besides light, the biggest piece to all of this. So whenever you do water orchids, you want to like sometimes you see like online or you like spritz it like I'm going to mist my orchid. It'll make my orchid happy. Psst, psst, psst. Every day I'm going to mist it. Psst, psst. No, no, it's not how it works. Orchids do not want to be spritzed. They want to be soaked. They want to be soaked and then they want to dry all the way. So what I'll do in the morning, like in, in a hot morning when it has been raining all the time, is I will start to, right? I'll spray my orchids. But I spray it more than that. Is that enough? Nope. Okay. So now not only did I spray them for a while, I'm going to go spray everything else normally. And then I'm going to come back probably 5 minutes later. And guess what? I'm going to spray it again. Because what happens is the roots, they get, just like when you pour water on like really dry dirt and it kind of runs off, it's the same with orchid roots. So if the orchid root is bone dry and you water it, most of the water kind of drains off. So you want to water it when it's wet. So the first time you make it wet, and the second time when it's already wet, it can really absorb the water. So some orchid people are nuts and they will orchid it. They'll water it like 2 or 3 or 4 times, just go round and around and around until they know they're super, super, super saturated. And you know they are wet and saturated when you see them. You know they're wet and saturated when you see these very, very wet green roots. You want green, dark green. And then they'll turn white when they're dry again, and you'll know you have to water them. Actually, let me show you one that's white so you know what a dry one looks like. This is my work area. Pretty messy, but okay. So here is, so do you see how these roots are white? Not green, they're white. So you want them, once they're white like this, then you water them until they're green. Okay, it's starting to sprinkle again, so I got to get this done. Like I said before, orchids do not like cold. They are tropical plants. So in the winter time, what I do is when it gets below 50, I start to freak out. And you see that over like the covered area of my lanai. I put everything under cover, keep everything heated. Different orchids, you got to worry at different times. Like this is what's called a hard cane dendrobium. They hate the cold. You got to get them right, get them in pretty quick. These Vanda, they hate the cold. You got to get them pretty quick. The Cattleya are not as picky. You can wait a little bit. So basically what I'm saying is they don't, at all. Like there's one called a grammatophyllum. We can go look at it. One day, it was 50 degrees maybe it was 48 degrees one night. I come outside. This was like seriously traumatic. Okay, so this guy right here, every leaf was black. And then the next couple days, they fell off. So apparently that is the most sensitive orchid to cold. So don't mess around with cold when it comes to orchids. Alas, we have come to the last mistake. I don't even know how many mistakes that was. Maybe 12-ish? A lot of them. But let's talk about fertilizer. This is probably my biggest pet peeve. It is my biggest pet peeve because people don't fertilize enough. For whatever reason in the orchid world, people have been taught you don't want to fertilize, and if you do, you just want to do a tiny bit. And that's not true. Just like any other plant, you want to fertilize orchids to the degree that the directions tell you to fertilize them. It's not like the directions are lying to you. There's lots of fertilizers out there nowadays that are for orchids. It's very straightforward. Like I take this stuff, I take a teaspoon, put it into a gallon of water, and water my plants. Now, my watering system is unbelievably sophisticated and advanced. It took me months and months and months to put together, and that's going to be a whole video in and of itself. But very simply put, you want NPK, you want nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. You want calcium and magnesium. If you don't have a lot of calcium in orchids, they will not be happy. And there's a bunch of micronutrients. Some seaweed extract will help them bloom. The fertilizer stuff gets really technical, but it's so important. The difference between, hold on, I'm going to stop here and find an unfertilized orchid versus a fertilized one. Okay, so people will say, I don't have to fertilize, my flowers are still great. And I mean, that's true. You can grow happy flowers, you know, just with good light, good water. You don't need fertilizer. So this plant has not been fertilized well. Still has a flower. It's a pretty flower. Very pretty flower. This plant, which I got at the same time, was fertilized. I mean, come on. Come on. Yes, they will both have flowers, but seriously? Fertilize. I don't know why people are so opposed to it. They're bigger and they're greener and they're happier and they have more flowers. And yes, you can get away with not fertilizing, but why? So I hope you enjoyed my mistakes. There's a thing on the screen here that's going to show you in the box. You've got to click on that because it's going to take you to the next video that's going to teach you everything you need to know. They're not mistakes, but they're going to show you everything you need to know to make things as good as possible.